So we are still on page 42, reading on, taking care of the parts of this complex argument. We're now at the paragraph that is at the bottom of the left column and goes up to the top. The main fact that the logic of this paragraph is built on is well known to us. There are many ways to get an investigation wrong, and only one way to get it right. There's one truth and many, many errors. You can see this when you're working at a math problem. If, for instance, the answer is x equals 42, well, there's only one way to get that right, x equals 42, but the whole infinite universe of other answers, well, what x might be for the false answers. So there's something about scientific research that's inherently dangerous and apt to be, at best, a waste of time. Now, it's useful to note that Rousseau takes a particularly modern turn with modern science. He takes our contemporary view, shared with those who argue against modern science. Not that it's false, but that despite its truth, it would be better not to pursue it. That's the particular trap that moderns who argue against scientists have to deal with. Anyone who could say that modern science is just wrong, as people do, for instance, with Darwin and his theories about evolution and natural selection, is on at least sound logical ground. But you're in a difficult place if you have to argue that something is true, but that it's better to have ignorance. And we saw that Rousseau was arguing that way at the end of the first part, and he still is following that train of reasoning here in the second. Now, what does he say? The problem, of course, is that there are too many ways to go wrong, and further problems. Who really seek science in the pure spirit of philosophy, just wanting to know truths that nothing hangs on, that are completely abstract, that are just knowledge for knowledge's own sake. Scientists have their ambition and their pride, just as artists and business people do, and therefore are subject to the corruption that can touch artists or business people because of their ambition and their pride. And of course, the main danger of scientific advances, it gives us powerful new tools. But how do we know how to use those tools? Does our cleverness in unlocking nature's secret, does that get ahead of our wisdom in knowing when to use and when not to use those? We see with atomic power and genetic technology and many other products of modern technology that we have this problem over and over again, and it's just getting more and more intense since Rousseau's day as we push the power of science forward. Moving on in page 42, we're now middle paragraph of the right-hand column. Rousseau is considering the vain goals of science, so vain, empty, have no ultimate purpose, no real use. So what shall we say about the value of the sciences if it takes our time? Only intelligent people can do it. Only people who've had education, which absorbs resources of society, can have careers in it. So it takes an important section of society. It takes some of our collective effort to make it possible. And then what real good thing does it produce to justify that? No. We could certainly say that people are free to do as they please. And if someone fancies a career in medical research to say, make a better baldness cure, well, That's the privilege of the person who decides that that's a satisfying life. But Rousseau takes a sterner and stricter morality. We all have a duty. We have to contribute to the common good, and we should all be judged by whether we do that or not. In general, to understand Rousseau, you should keep in mind that at bottom he has a simple and strict morality. That we all owe our efforts in life to the common good, to our friends and the nation around us, and that we must discharge our duties before we indulge whatever useless thing seems to please us. And that is the problem from Rousseau's point of view with the sciences, since they come, as we've seen when looking at their origins, they come from idleness. Bored people looking at the sky, trying to figure out how those planets move around. That's where sciences come from. And this, he says, is something where one hand washes the other. The luxury and idleness of the sciences gives them a certain character and creates more luxury that can then support more of the sciences. Think about all the things that technology has developed since Descartes' day that don't fit the hopes that Descartes himself had for sciences. That is, they don't fit our real needs. They're just refinements on the idle and empty pleasures that we put technology to use for. And Rousseau is perfectly willing to condemn this waste of time as something immoral, that because it's an evil not to do good. If you're not discharging your duty, then you can be blamed for that, even if the thing you do doesn't seem to harm anyone. Every useless citizen is pernicious. It is a problem. And from here on in this paragraph, Rousseau will look at the accomplishments of science and judge them against these simple criterion of morality. So you probably will recognize some of these things as things you recognize as scientific victories. Others are less familiar, but they belong in that category. If you've been through core science, you've been through the physical sciences 102, you probably have seen the basic formula for gravitational force between two bodies. That's what allows us to explain how the solar system actually works. That's an entirely abstract investigation. The true answer about that has nothing to do with the things that human beings care about and really need to care about in order to live good lives. This was an early victory in astronomy and understanding how the planets move. We don't have to go into the details, but it supports the knowledge that we have now. This we make you at least start studying in Math 101. It's still with us, all these peculiar precise terms that have to do with understanding squiggly lines that equations produce on the XY axis. That is something that society requires at least advanced and ambitious people to learn. And notice how distant those are from human concerns. After all, why do most AUIS students hate having to take Math 101, particularly the people who aren't going off in a certain career direction that will require them to use that? Why is it that that just seems like a waste of time? Well, Rousseau says it's because it is a waste of time. And he would be hard on us for requiring it of you. If it's a waste of time, then it's not only neutral, useless, it's taking away from the time that you should put into fulfilling your duty. And then he goes on to more advanced medical and philosophical speculations. Right? We wonder how soul and body go together. We think about the far universe and whether there's life on other planets. Biology looks into quite peculiar questions, quite precise questions of species that for most of our human lives entirely escape our notice. And again, it's not that he says this knowledge isn't knowledge, and not that there isn't something impressive about it. He even calls it sublime, high and elevated. But there's a bit of sarcasm in that. It's so high and so elevated that we have no real reason to care about it. And the test of whether it's any good is again whether it measures up to Rousseau's simple morality. If we'd never discovered that, if scientists never taught us this, if your university education did not require you to learn at least some parts of it, what bad things would happen? Would those bad things be bad against what really counts? And this is a list of the things that Rousseau considers really count, and as always, they are simple and basic. Would there be fewer people? Rousseau thinks that when a nation is growing and expanding, that's a sign of its health and its virtue and its good condition. Would we be less well governed? Would we be less organized and directed to our duty and our virtue if we didn't know these things? Would we be weaker with regard to our outside enemies and less free? Be less thriving? Would be not living so well? Would we be even more perverse? With the strange vices that have come up in advanced societies, things that are bad to do, but which simpler people wouldn't even want to do. Does any of this advancement prevent those perverse things? So he admits that science brings us knowledge, and that it's very impressive in its successes. But when you weigh those good things against the good things that really count, what society really needs, how much are those scientific good things worth? And if you hold them up against a reasonable standard of morality, everyone has a duty to do. Everyone must serve the public interest. How much of that is actually happening under the leadership of sciences and advances in the arts? How much of the dream of Descartes, that if we push forward with science, then we will be able to solve the problems that we really need to solve and live better in that way? How much of that is actually being fulfilled by our scientific society?